Hi, Dermot. How you doing?
I'm doing very well. How are you?
I'm wonderful. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you.
Where are you located?
I'm in Dublin.
Oh,
Dublin.
wonderful. I
What
love
about
it.
you? What about
I'm
you?
I'm in Kansas City, Missouri.
Very good. Good jazz history there.
Oh man, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I interviewed somebody earlier this week in Ireland, and my dad was full-blooded Italian, but on my other side, I'm about 20-30% Irish. So I'm
Okay. Okay.
it gets around pretty well, the Irish blood, huh?
Well, they say that there's Irish genes or Irish heritage in something like 80 million of the US population, which is what, 300, 320 or something.
Yeah.
So I don't know to what degree that's true, but it's yeah, I mean yeah, a lot of people left here in the 19th century and the early 20th century for,
Yeah.
for economic reasons by and large, so that's where and of course they had big families, big Catholic families. I'm sure the Italians were the same.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's spread pretty well for sure.
What
So
what what part of Ireland is your Irish roots from?
I did that 23 and me, and I have to check what it was. I didn't needle
Yeah,
in too much specifically.
right.
Yeah, I might have to add that as an addendum.
Yeah, well, you might have to come and do some research.
Yes, absolutely. I would love to. Love to have a pint over there for sure.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, Man, it's great to meet you. This is a wonderful project that I'm looking forward to getting into. So, some other blues is a celebration of accomplished, Irish jazz musicians, and I want to talk about this recording. But before we get to that point, talk to me a little bit about the Irish music scene, jazz specifically.
Okay. Well, like jazz everywhere, it's relatively small, right? Uh, so the big stadium fillers in Ireland are the same as they are in the States or in other parts of Europe. But the jazz scene in Ireland is currently very healthy. I mean, I could go out and see live jazz of high quality, probably 7 days a week.
Wow.
And that hasn't always been the case. I mean, I've been going to jazz gigs and buying albums and whatever for 40 years or more. And it seems to have bounced back post COVID quite well. A bit of a slow start. Um, but and also most of the musicians that I know are, they seem to be making a living through a combination of playing jazz, then playing anything at all, and also teaching. So some of them, and again the same as everywhere else in the world, because there's now college programs. There's postgrad and undergrad college programs where you can go and study jazz and improvised music. There are lecturing and professorship, et cetera, opportunities. But I think overall there's more live gigs on than there would have been certainly before COVID. And as best as I can remember, at least it's as healthy as it ever was in the 30 or 40 years that I've been interested, um, which is good. But it's got a lot of competition. I mean, there's traditional and folk music, which is big in Ireland. Pop and rock of all forms is very popular. Classical is very popular. So jazz is probably still in the 5% popularity
Yeah.
category, I'd say, as it is everywhere, as far as I can make it.
Yeah, it certainly is. Well, let's dig in before we get into some other blues with Louis and Noel. I want to know a little bit about you and your background. What's your involvement with this
Okay.
project?
So I am the executive producer, coordinator, marketeer. Like I am the part-time one-man record company that's behind this release and the other release that we put out earlier this year, which was a solo record by Louis Stewart. Background to it is I am a amateur radio presenter. I do present a weekly eclectic radio show on Dublin City FM, which is kind of similar in ethos and approach to NPR, in that it's non-commercial, it's kind of special interest. I'm doing that for about 20 years. And professionally, mainly I've worked in IT and digital media, but it's through the digital media part that I understood the process of digitization, and understood a lot of the players in terms of, you know, who to go to for artwork and who to go to for duplication, etc., etc. And because I'm a music fan, I'm involved. I'm also on the board of a local jazz-focused organization called the Improvised Music Company. So I knew a lot of the community. But maybe if I tell you about the genesis of the project, it'll kind of put it all into perspective. So Louis Stewart's best album, in my view, and a lot of other people's view, is a solo album called Out on Its Own. And during COVID, while out safe distance walking with a friend of mine, I was talking about the album and saying, I'm playing this a lot on the radio show, and it's a tragedy that it's not available. It just wasn't in stock. The reason it wasn't in stock was that the guy who set up the record label, a guy called Gerald Davis, had died 15 years previously. Louis Stewart had died 7 years previously, and the stock had just fizzled out. So he said, why don't you find out where the masters are? At which I scoffed and, said, used some expletive and said, that's not going to happen. Anyway, a few months later, because in lockdown, you got plenty of time to think about things. I started making some inquiries, did a little bit of research, and found out that this guy, Gerald Davis's wife, was still alive. And I, sensitively mailed her and asked her, would she by any chance know where the masters were and who had the rights. Next thing, I'm talking to her son, who lives in New Zealand. And a few weeks later, having got endorsement for the idea of, wouldn't it be great if we could do this? I'm putting crate loads of analog tapes into the boot of my car, where they've sat in a lockup for 15 years, and we catalog those, and it looks like there's more than we expected. And then we sample digitize 2 sets of tapes. One is Out on Its Own, and the other is Some Other Blues, which didn't have a name at the time. It was unreleased, unknown recording. And then we realized we have the masters. They digitize well. So the only thing that's stopping us now is, a small budget, some artwork, some sleeve notes, but it's all very doable from this point on. Yeah. So, and because like Louis Stewart's stature in the Irish jazz world is the equivalent of Miles Davis or Louis Armstrong in the global jazz world, right? He was referred to as Louis, right? Everybody knew who he was, and he still is to this day the kind of towering figure in terms of his achievements and his ability and his influence on the whole community. So that meant that I got a lot of support from people who liked the idea, were willing to help, could tell me anecdotes or put me in touch with somebody or whatever. So I got the best guys to do the mastering and the best guys to do the artwork, etc., etc. I got the jazz correspondent of the Irish Times to do the sleeve notes for the first album. So that's the background to it. And then the response to that was, and that was the big question, does anybody care? Like the jazz community is small. A lot of people might have this album on vinyl, etc. So the big question was, did anybody care about a re-release of a nearly 50-year-old album from a dead musician? And the answer was, yes, they did. So we got tremendous press. Locally, the Irish Times did a full-page feature on it. We were on national radio. We got international press. And we sold the album mainly in the British Isles and in the US, but also across Europe and into parts of Asia and Australia. So that was great momentum.
So all of us have this flashpoint that pulls us into the jazz world. The album, the moment, the live performance. What was it for you? What pulled you in? Because you're obviously a driving force. You love jazz. How did it begin?
So I would say the catalyst was David Sanborn's playing on David Bowie's Young Americans album.
Cool.
That was probably it. Because I had gone through all the previous albums, but I remember listening to that loads and going, you know what? It's not just the arrangements, or it's not just the image or the kind of pop icon thing of Bowie itself. Those solos were really catching my attention. So at the time, there was a municipal record library in this city, and you could walk in and borrow 2 or 3 albums at a time. So I made my way down there and started just going through saxophone players. And, luckily got started on Sonny Stitt and Charlie Parker pretty quickly. And, so once I began to hear bebop and kind of soulful playing, uh, it just became very exciting to me, and I just wanted to hear the next one and the next one. It was kind of like you tasted one type of food and you wanted to taste a lot more of that food from that source. And at the time, the jazz scene was quite active here. There was local bands. There was some good musicians coming through. They were bringing in people from, summer camps in Banff and Berkeley and places like that. So, you get to see Louis Stewart one week, and then you get to see Sonny Fortune the next week, and, Bobby Shield, or whoever. So it was just, there was plenty of fuel for my interest. So that was it. I was hooked,
Yeah.
and I came from that background, but also from soul and blues. My first record was a Jim Croce record, which probably had a kind of a jazzy, bluesy, poppy thing about it, So I guess it was always there.
Yeah.
And when I think about it, Irish TV in the '60s consisted of homemade programs which to my mind weren't very interesting, but a lot of imported American TV, so American cartoons, American series, so whether it's Y50 or Ironside or whatever. And what's the soundtrack to all of those TV shows and all of those movies? It's essentially, LA session musicians, and it's from that period. A lot of it is from a kind of a jazz background.
Yeah.
So I think it was just embedded from being a kid.
Yeah.
And then when I got the opportunity to explore it more and listen to it and see it live, it was like, yeah, this is good stuff.
So with some other blues, we're talking about this combination of Louis and Noel. What's so special about it? What do you like? You talked about Louis being kind of the Miles Davis, and
Yeah,
obviously we all know the power of Miles and what he did with his bands and the great quartets and all of
yeah.
those things. But what is it about these cats that was so special, chemistry wise and sonically, that makes it something that you sought after to make sure that people listen to it?
So first of all, so Noel was known as a player, but he'd taken a full-time job with the national TV station. So he was involved in arranging and conducting, and a lot of the time arranging and conducting stuff that wasn't really that interesting, kind of schmaltzy game show stuff and whatever. He did a lot of Eurovision. I don't know about the Eurovision Song Contest, but did a lot of that stuff. But he had given Louis Stewart his first professional gig probably in jazz in the early '60s, and it was known that he was a great piano player. When it turned out that I had these masters, I was speaking to some of the kind of more senior guys in the jazz community. They were like, "Oh my God, this has got to be solid gold." Noel was a brilliant piano player, but he didn't play very much, and we didn't know about this recording. And it's from 1977, which is just a few months after Louis' solo record, and he was at his peak. So their conclusion was it has to be really good. So that one, there was a big drive for it. But what really was special about it was that Noel was kind of known as a Bill Evans influence. Bill Evans, let's say, plus Oscar Peterson would probably be the major drivers. And Louis was a big Bill Evans fan. And people were intrigued to hear what it was like. And when he heard how they both kind of went toe to toe as performing and improvising peers, there was a kind of sometimes you go to a gig and there's a spark in the room. There was a spark in the room in that recording. The big question mark was, why had it never been released? And it was just some theories, one of which was the guy who did the mastering said that piano is a little bit tired. It's not like a top-notch piano, so maybe that was the reason. But anyway, it's just when we heard it, and when it was remastered, we realized that this was, regardless of the history, this was a really, really good album. And piano guitar duets are not very common. And certainly there was no other known recording of Louis Stewart with Noel Kelehan. Also, what was interesting was that Noel was widely revered within the jazz world in Ireland because he was very generous with his time, helped a lot of people understand theory and arrangement. He helped some of them with composition kind of guidelines. So that's really what was special about it, was this should be released, and it hasn't been released, and it's from Louis' kind of golden period. So that was the reason.
You know, what's astonishing to me, and a lot of these stories have been coming out in this more modern era of media, of like independent journalists finding things and reporting on it. There has to be so many recordings like this that have just never seen the light of day.
There are, like, I have, like, with Louis alone, so we've released two. There's another 10 to 12 albums we could release, some of which were previously released, but some of them are not released. And since this project, two people have given me large archives of amateur recordings, all live recordings of the same guys from the same period. So there is stuff out there in shoe boxes, in cardboard boxes, in attics and under beds. And I guess, even though the ability to play them when you first get them, because the players are hard to get, like an analog reel-to-reel player is a difficult thing to find these days, or in good working order. But the ability to digitize and use digital tools to enhance or to remaster, and with live stuff, there's a lot of enhancement. You need to take out a lot of kind of let's call it ancillary sound, but the technology is there to do it, and it's not expensive.
Yeah.
So and there is an appetite for it. So I think if the quality is good and the source material is good, it just takes somebody like me who's willing to put in the hours and not get paid for it, but just do it out of, kind of labor of love, because the end results are very satisfying.
But isn't that the whole row with jazz, though? I mean, a lot of us, including me, we do this because we love it. It's not some kind of thing where there's a monetary
Yeah.
pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. It's really about sonically, culturally, and just overall giving people that feeling of something that we love, which is jazz music.
Yeah. Yeah, everybody likes to hear an album, a really good album that they've never heard before. So with the response to the first Louis release, we knew there was an appetite, there was an audience. And we also knew that with the Noel Kelehan album, there would be an audience as well. I didn't expect it to be as critically well received, because in my mind, it was a 4-star, whereas the other one was a 5-star, that kind of, and I guess anybody who does anything creatively, they're always going to be self-deprecating and self-critical to some degree. But you're right. It should be out there. It should be out there. And I in another interview I did a couple of months ago, I was challenged about, is the kind of legacy reissue thing a good thing for contemporary musicians, or does it distract attention from them and their work? Which is a very valid point. But my point really was that, if you're gonna, if you have a recording and you can put it out, it's got more value than just having a recording and sticking it on the internet, or and what does that do? So it definitely has raised the profile of Louis Stewart, and in this case Noel Kelehan, outside of Ireland. Two is, it's raised the profile of Irish jazz and the market for jazz in Ireland. And Ireland's about the size of Missouri approximately in terms of scale, population, whatever. So, and as the Irish Times journalist said to me months ago, he said every Irish jazz musician has got 500 of their own CDs under their bed, right? So the other point of it is, which I really feel very strongly about, is that if you're going to do the recording, you got to put it out there, but you got to put it out there really well. You also have to do the legwork, or get somebody to do the legwork to raise the profile of that recording, or else there was no point in doing it all. So again, this project, from my perspective, has proven that if you do those things, you can get attention, and you can get radio play, you can get press reviews. And so if Louis or Noel Kelehan were still alive today, I think people would want to book them, So
yeah,
so that's another reason to do it,
there's so many semantics that go into this, but the bottom line is that it's put out there for people to listen to it. So my question to you is, for those that get this album, what do you hope they get from it?
Well, I hope they get the same sense that I get, and that is a tingle of excitement and in some places amazement. I mean, what do I like when I listen to a jazz recording? What do I look for? So uh, I look for excellence. I look for sounds I haven't heard before. I look for a good sonic experience. It's been produced well. I look for humor. I look for, like, where do they fit in that kind of great um, stream of artists from the very earliest recordings to today. Who are they citing? Who are they quoting? You're trying to figure out, was it Bill Evans? Was it Tal Farrell? Was it who? What drove the selection? It's really what I'm looking for is a high level of engagement. Um, but the overwhelming feedback so far in this album is that people didn't realize that Noel could play at that level. They'd seen him as an older guy doing, sideman gigs for visiting players occasionally, but they'd never seen him, at that time playing that way. Noel also released a well-known quintet album, which was much more mellow. Sax and flugelhorn and piano, bass, and drums. So this was him kind of in a bebop and post-bop, highly energized, spectacular playing at times mode. So that's what you hope, is that people are really engaged, excited, impressed, and want to go back and get it again, listen to it again. So
I think that the spirit and the essence of this is a metaphor for jazz. It's this eternal flame that just gets stronger and stronger. As much as you've mentioned early on that there's a 5% share, those that really love this music will find a way, no matter what, to keep it going.
They will. I'm always trying to indoctrinate people who are either anti-jazz or on the fence about it. Right? There's a friend of mine, and he's very blunt in his views about just about everything. But I was talking to him about this project, over the Christmas period, and he said, I just don't like jazz. I don't like it. And I said, but that's like saying you don't like pop music, or you don't like country music, or you don't like film. I mean, it's like you're just putting a negative taint on the entire. And I said, I bet you I could make you a playlist that would, one, you'd recognize some of them, and two, you'd actually might find yourself clicking your fingers or tapping your feet to it. So there's that as well. Like a lot of people who bought the first album bought it because I kind of sold it to them with such enthusiasm that they kind of went, oh, I guess I should support the project a bit, and I'll buy a copy, that kind of stuff. And lots of the time they came back and went, this is amazing. This is really good. This isn't what I thought jazz was. I mean, to people who don't like jazz, the cliche is four guys playing different tunes at the same time,
Right.
So yeah, I'm always trying to protect it and enhance it and get people interested in it and get them to go to live, because when it's live, 40 or 50 people in a small room, it's a special experience.
Absolutely, it is. So if anyone wants to pick up these albums, learn more about the project, learn more about what you're doing, how can they do that?
Oliviarecords.com is the website. They can buy it direct from there, or they can go to Bandcamp and they can buy it direct from there. They can contact me, of course, Dermot at oliviarecords.com. Simple as that. If they do searches now, which is very gratifying, if you do Google searches on Louis Stewart and Noel Kelehan, Some Other Blues, or out on his own, you'll find lots and lots and lots of reviews. So
right on.
So that's the thing to do. Check us out, check it out online. You don't have to believe just what I say.
Right.
The rest of the world has embraced these two albums, and if you don't mind, can I plug a third one? So we're going to have a third release this year.
Sure.
So Jim Hall came to Ireland in December of 1982, and Louis Stewart and Gerald Davis, the guy who originally set up this Olivia Records label that I've reactivated, they cajoled him into playing a gig, and we have got we've got it remastered, and it's going to be released in vinyl and on CD around November time. So
Excellent. Dermot,
Yeah,
thank you for taking time out today. Thanks for the work to keep this jazz going. It's always so great to go over the pond and talk to cats from the other side and just understand how much love there is around the world for this music.
that's great, Joe. It's been my pleasure. Thank you.
You bet.